we have achieved is we have given many young people, both men and women, the opportunities to achieve a little bit more than perhaps that they would had they not been involved in JC activities. The purpose of JC's activities is to offer young people the ability to maximise their own self-potential, and they do this by participating in many community projects. In a national sense, over the past 50 years, JCs have been involved in many major projects. In fact, the Keep Australia Beautiful campaign originated from the 1971 national project of Australian JCs, My Country's Keeper. We've also been involved in many other projects that in fact have had an impact on the communities.
Do you think the JCs have changed over the past 50 years here?
Most certainly. I think and I hope that JCs are constantly changing in order to meet their members' needs. JCs, to survive, and like any honorary organisation, need to open their eyes to the issues that in fact are relevant in their community.
This all-weather sport has taken off in the western southern parts of Australia, with as many as 20 venues operating in Perth alone. Former Test cricket all-rounder Gary Gilmore tested the synthetic surface and slower bowling than he's used to, and agreed it would not only be a lot of fun for the average cricketer of all ages, but it will also be valuable for off-season training for top liners. The game is not quite Test rules, as it allows for scoring off the walls as well as by running. 8 persons to a team, with each person bowling 2 overs, and each pair of batsmen facing 4 8-ball overs. Getting out simply reduces your scoring. The first of the indoor cricket locally will be played at Brian Scott's wickets.
Humble beginnings in 1963. As well as worldwide success, the group boasts 28 hit songs, more than any other pop group. The original Hollies consisted of 4 musicians, but in the past 20 years, in a number of lineup changes, the membership has swelled to 7. 2 of the original members, guitarist Tony Hicks and vocalist Alan Clark, are still with the band. At today's Hamilton press conference, Alan Clark said he was surprised that the group had survived for 2 decades.
When we first started, we didn't think it was going to last anyway, so every couple of years we were saying, well, how long do you think it'll last? Well, never mind, we'll go on for another couple of years and we'll revise after that. And it just carried going on and on until it's 20 years this year. Writes for Living with John, and this guy over here, the artist, and this guy he's new with us, Jamie Moses, and Stephen Stroud, who's a great bass player. So yes, the sound has changed, but it's more up to date.
And what about the concert in Newcastle? What are you going to be putting on?
Well, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people there who want us to do some of the records that we made success with. Just one look. But we are going to do some of the new stuff. We just did a new album with Graham Nash.
A play that deliberately confines itself to one setting, its main character to a wheelchair, and its cast to 2 people, poses itself some difficult theatrical problems. Such is the situation in Duet for One, where the audience sits in on a verbal battle between a multiple sclerosis sufferer and former violinist Stephanie Abrahams and her doctor. The play asks what happens to a person when their prime motivation for living is taken away, and Stephanie has to strip away the layers of defence to face that situation squarely. Helen Morse gives a finely modulated performance as she moves from defiance through to despair and then finally to honesty. But Don Reed, hampered by a rather thick European accent, has a rather two-dimensional and cliched character to play in The Doctor. For such a play which demands intense attention from the audience, Duet for One doesn't really have enough dramatic moments to capture that attention wholly. But to be fair, I think the vast civic space didn't serve the production very well. I would rather have seen it in a smaller space. I may then have felt a bit more warmly towards it, but as it stands, it was a bit too much of an intellectual exercise.
This is a sample of the water that has been causing all the complaints. It may be brown, but the Hunter District Water Board says it's tasteless and odourless. It has been caused by an increase in the amount of iron in the water from Chichester Dam as a result of the drought, as Chief Engineer of the Water Board, Mr David Anderson, explains.
Well, we've had no inflow into Chichester Dam for some months. The level has dropped and we've been getting a lot of iron and manganese coming out of solution in the bottom of the reservoir. And that's coming through the system at the present time.
There's been quite a few complaints about the clothes acting as filters. Is there any way that the housewives can stop this?
Yes, I know it is a nuisance, but using the spray rinse cycle on washing machines does tend to make the clothes act as filters and collect all the iron material and stain them. And deep rinsing or staying away from spray rinsing will help this problem, although it probably won't cure it completely.
What's the Water Board doing about the problem?
Well, we're endeavouring to treat the iron to a greater extent with some temporary dosing facilities. We are chlorinating, and we're sure that chlorine is getting through the system so that there's no danger to health in the problem. I would stress that point.
Superintendent Conaghan began his police career in Sydney at the age of 18. He came to Newcastle in 1977 as Assistant Chief Superintendent. In 1981, he was promoted to Chief Superintendent and became responsible for the administration of the entire Newcastle Police District. Superintendent Conaghan says he has no regrets about devoting his life to police work.
I found it very rewarding. Over the years I've had the opportunity of working with some very brilliant detectives, and later on when I reverted to uniform and became an administrative officer, I had the opportunity also of working with some very fine men.
And specifically your work here in Newcastle, how have you found that for the last 5 or so years?
My work here has been administrative. I've had the opportunity of oversighting police in the valley right up to Scone and Murrurundi, Willow Tree, up the coast as far as Taree and Coopanook and the coalfields, and I found them a fine body of men, and it was a pleasure to be their superior.
Before the ferry issue, students in Stockton had the choice of free, private and government bus travel to Newcastle. They either went by private bus straight to school or by ferry and then government bus. Now, in a bid to make sure the ferry is used, the Department of Education has issued free ferry and government bus passes only. There are no private bus passes into Newcastle. Apparently, Fern Bay pupils are not affected, but some have had their classes taken away from them today. The matter will be investigated by the Education Department. Meanwhile, private bus company officials say they'll be forced to lay off drivers.
It means something like in the vicinity of 5 drivers, I think it'll be, that'll have to be retrenched, and 6 less buses at the moment will have to be put up for sale. Also, the school children have been carrying our local bus runs for quite some time, and it could mean some cutbacks in the in local bus services.
As the Education Department points out, since the reintroduction of the ferry service, more than 100 pupils have willingly started using it in favour of the private buses. But this was the reaction we got from pupils outside Newcastle High School today.
Private buses. Private buses. You don't keep getting onto other buses, and it's much more better.
Oh, the private bus.
Why?
Oh, no, it's like a lot easier than catching off the ferry and going onto the government bus.
It was a day of rising tension in Jerusalem. Supporters of the Defence Minister, Mr. Sharon, stood 4 hours outside the Prime Minister's office, chanting for him to fight on and not resign. Across town, several hundred demonstrators from the Peace Now movement marched quietly with flaming torches. At the points where they came close together, there were some ugly moments. The police, fearing an escalation of trouble, cleared the pro-Sharon demonstrators away. 15 minutes later, we heard the explosion, and all was chaos. A grenade had apparently been thrown amongst the Peace Now demonstrators. Ten people were wounded, 1 was killed. The cabinet broke up an hour later. They'd voted to accept the findings of the massacre report. Ten people were wounded, 1 was killed. The blast had shaken the cabinet room 100 yards away. The Interior Minister
Since moving from the portfolio of primary industry to defence last May, this is the first official visit Mr Ian Sinclair has made to Williamtown. This morning, after non-camera inspection of the barrage and some of its weaponry, Mr Sinclair stepped into the firing line and most of the journalists present were specialist defence correspondents attending a seminar at the Joint Warfare Establishment. However, apart from a few...
We said the previous decision to acquire a carrier was that a political decision won't be taken the next time.
The main purpose of the exercise, according to the Minister, is to publicise the planned expansion of Williamtown for the F-18 fighter, due to begin arriving in 1984. He said it is important the public is fully aware of what's intended.
Is there any policy on land acquisition or compensation to any individuals identified as being particularly disadvantaged by the increased noise levels in the environmental report?
One of the aspects of land acquisition that does concern me is that we need to make sure that people building or developing in the proximity of the airfield or in the weapons test area are aware that there can be noise problems. And I'm not too sure that it's necessary for the Commonwealth to acquire the land, but I am concerned that people who might seek to invest and develop the land should have forewarning of the character of the noise pollution that might affect that particular block. There is a necessary consideration by Parliament for the works program itself.
Orders worth $120 million have already been placed, and the eventual Australian share of the $2,400 million order will amount to about $370 million. However, while local firms will benefit from the expansion of Williamtown Base, no Newcastle companies are involved in the supply of components for the F-18.
It's the second year Nearly Anything Goes has been run in Maitland, and judging by today's attendance, it may become a regular attraction on the Maitland calendar. Teams entered in 5 sections, the most popular of which was non-sporting. In it were teams like Boori Benders, Fat Bags and Sweat Hogs. Athletic or not, they did their best at overcoming the maze of obstacles set before them. The NBN Television won beneficiaries today, $4,000 to raise to the cancer appeal, and a junior team called Industrial Galvanisers donated their prize money $100.
Tricky, icy conditions claimed a number of victims at the World Cup competition at Tottenau in West Germany. In the giant slalom, defending champion Phil Maher of the United States turned in a poor performance, finishing 4th. Last weekend, Yugoslav Bojan Krujaz won the giant slalom at Markstein in France, but he could not repeat the performance, losing a ski on his second run. The victor was the evergreen Ingemar Stenmark of Sweden, who turned in a brilliant second run for the 25,000 spectators. Another Scandinavian, Hannu Mikkola of Finland, proved his worth on the snow-covered forest roads of Sweden to win the Swedish rally. Mikkola held off a determined challenge from local hero Stig Blomqvist to win the event and take the lead in the World Championships. Snow forced the cancellation of most weekend soccer games in Europe, but a few teams still braved the elements. In West Germany, Borussia Dortmund still played Bochum, and both sides showed remarkable skill in the conditions, playing a 2-2 draw. The goalkeepers are still recovering.
Same time, those and other local top performers have been included in the stateside. Debbie would have been especially pleased at having beaten world champion Kim Lampard of Sydney.
And how did you break the world
Of
record?
the absence of world
That was in
champion
the
Brett
actual
Wing
number of
to
crossings.
grab
I
the
actually
state title.
betted the...
Titles were held at Clarenstown on the Williams River, a spot described as equal to anywhere in the world for this type of sport. Other local skiers to make the 10-man New South Wales squad were Lee Richards, Shane Pugh and Noel Wellham.
In Newcastle, more than 300 AFULE members from the Broadmeadow Loco Yards and Port Waratah met at the Adamstown RSL Club to discuss the dispute. They also voted not to return to work before Wednesday at the earliest and to hold another meeting then to discuss any developments which may take place. Spokesman for the engine men, Mr Bruce Woods, says any return to work will depend on what transpires tomorrow.
The members have decided to continue the stoppage at this stage until at least midnight on Tuesday the 15th of February, unless satisfactory negotiations resolve the issue. If there's no satisfactory negotiations at that stage, there'll be a further meeting at 9 a.m. To further report to the members of those negotiations.